The prison door was never locked. In fact, it had been standing open for years. The tragedy wasn't that Ethan couldn't escape. The tragedy was that he never realized he was the one holding the key. Most people imagine prisons as places surrounded by concrete walls, steel bars, and locked gates. But the most dangerous prison in the world looks nothing like that. It has no guards, no fences, no chains. It's built from routines, quiet compromises, and the stories we tell ourselves until they sound like truth. I'll start tomorrow. Now isn't the right time. Maybe next year. At first, they're harmless excuses. Eventually, they become invisible walls. Ethan was 34 years old, and from the outside, his life looked exactly the way success was supposed to look. He had a steady income, a comfortable apartment, parents who were proud of him, and friends who thought he'd figured life out. Yet every evening, before stepping out of his car, he did something he had never confessed to another soul. He sat in complete silence, staring through the windshield as if he were waiting for permission to begin living. Sometimes it lasted 10 minutes, sometimes nearly an hour. He wasn't avoiding home. He was avoiding the question waiting inside the silence. Is this really my life, or just the life I settled for? The next evening was no different. Ethan watched strangers pass by without ever noticing him. A little girl ran into her father's arms after he returned from work. An elderly couple laughed while struggling to carry grocery bags together. A teenager sat on the curb watching the sunset as though there was nowhere else in the world he needed to be. Ethan realized he couldn't remember the last time he'd done something without checking the time. The last week felt exactly like the week before it. Last month felt exactly like last year. It was as though someone had quietly copied and pasted his life hundreds of times while he wasn't paying attention. That realization frightened him more than failure ever could. Failure meant you had been brave enough to try. But what if you spent your entire life never truly trying at all? Looking at his reflection in the windshield, he barely recognized the man staring back. The face was familiar, but the dreams behind the eyes had quietly disappeared. Somewhere between chasing security and avoiding disappointment, he'd stopped asking himself what he actually wanted. He had become exceptional at meeting everyone else's expectations, while slowly abandoning his own. The prison hadn't appeared overnight. It had been built every time he chose certainty over curiosity, comfort over courage, and someday over today. The most frightening part was that he couldn't remember making those choices. They had happened so slowly that they no longer felt like decisions. They simply felt like life. Everything changed the following Tuesday. On his way to work, Ethan stopped at a neighborhood coffee shop he'd visited hundreds of times before. Near the window sat an elderly man with a weathered notebook resting beside an untouched cup of coffee. He wasn't reading. He was simply staring at one page as though it carried the weight of an entire lifetime. Then, without warning, the man smiled and quietly wiped away a tear. As Ethan walked past, his eyes caught the title written across the page, "The Life I Never Lived." 6 words, nothing more. Yet they followed him through every meeting, every phone call, every forced smile that day. The next Tuesday he returned, hoping to speak with the stranger. The old man was there again, sitting in the same chair. But before Ethan could introduce himself, the man stood, left a few bills beneath his coffee cup, smiled with an expression that carried more regret than joy, and disappeared into the morning crowd. By the time Ethan reached the sidewalk, he was gone. The waitress noticed his confusion. "He comes every Tuesday," she said softly, "always with that notebook." Ethan asked if she knew him. She shook her head. "Only one thing. Years ago, he told me it isn't a diary." She glanced toward the empty chair before. "It's a list of every dream he kept postponing, until there wasn't enough life left to chase them." Ethan felt something inside him collapse. He wasn't shaken because of the old man. He was shaken because, for the first time, he could clearly imagine what his own notebook might one day say. That night, sleep refused to come easily. When it finally did, it carried Ethan somewhere he had never been before. He found himself standing in a long hallway lined with hundreds of wooden doors. Each one bore a different name. The business you never started, the places you never visited, the family you never built, the person you could have become. His heart raced as he reached for the nearest handle, but the door disappeared before his fingers could touch it. He ran to another, gone, then another, gone. One by one, every door vanished until only a single figure remained at the end of the hallway. An 18-year-old boy stood beneath a flickering light, his eyes bright with hope and impossible dreams. Ethan recognized him instantly. It was himself. The younger Ethan smiled sadly and asked, "What happened to us?" Before Ethan could answer, the hallway collapsed into darkness. He woke at 3:17 a.m., his heart pounding against his chest. Sitting alone on the edge of his bed, he realized he had spent years blaming work, money, timing, and responsibility for the life he wasn't living. But what if those things had never been the prison? What if the only thing keeping him trapped was the story he repeated every morning? Not today. By sunrise, the question had become impossible to silence. The days that followed felt strangely unfamiliar. Nothing around Ethan had changed, yet everything looked different. The office felt smaller. Meetings sounded emptier. Conversations repeated themselves like lines in a play he'd memorized years ago. One afternoon, while searching through an old desk drawer, he found a faded notebook covered in dust. He had bought it 12 years earlier, convinced it would become the journal of a remarkable life. Inside were goals written in confident handwriting. Start my own business before I'm 30. Travel somewhere that scares me. Write something that matters. Every page after those dreams was blank. Not because he had failed, but because he had never begun. During lunch, he wandered into a nearby park and sat quietly on a weathered bench. Across the path, an elderly groundskeeper carefully dug a tiny oak sapling from a crack between two paving stones and replanted it in open soil. Curious, Ethan asked why he had bothered saving such a small tree. The old man smiled without looking up. "Because if it stays where it is," he said, gently pressing the earth around its roots, "it'll spend its whole life surviving when it was created to grow." Those words settled deep inside Ethan. For the first time, he understood that comfort had never been the same as peace. He hadn't been protecting his life. He had been protecting his fear. That evening, Ethan opened the notebook he had abandoned years before. He stared at the empty pages for a long time before crossing out one word written at the top of the first page. Someday. Beneath it, with trembling hands, he wrote 4 simple words. Tomorrow, I begin. It wasn't a promise that everything would work out. It wasn't a guarantee that he would succeed. It was simply the first honest promise he had made to himself in years. The next morning, fear was still there. His doubts hadn't disappeared. His hands still trembled. But something had changed. Fear was no longer making the decisions. Ethan began with one small action, then another. An evening class he'd postponed for years, a difficult phone call he'd been avoiding, a page written before bed instead of another hour lost scrolling through his phone. Nobody applauded, nobody noticed. The world kept turning exactly as it always had. Yet with every promise he kept, another crack appeared in the invisible walls he had spent years building around himself. Weeks became months. Some plans failed. Others surprised him. But failure no longer frightened him the way regret once had. He finally understood that courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is deciding that the life waiting on the other side of fear is worth walking toward anyway. Years later, someone asked Ethan what had changed his life. They expected him to mention a promotion, a mentor, or a lucky opportunity. Instead, he smiled and answered, "Nothing changed until I did." He never saw the old man in the coffee shop again. Sometimes he wondered if he had been real. Sometimes he wondered if he had simply appeared when Ethan needed him most. In the end, it didn't matter, because the notebook had never belonged to one man. It belonged to everyone who keeps postponing the life they secretly long for. Maybe it belongs to you. Perhaps there's a dream you've hidden behind responsibility. A conversation you've delayed because the timing never feels perfect. A version of yourself you've promised to become someday. But someday has a habit of quietly becoming never. Life rarely steals our dreams in one dramatic moment. It steals them one ordinary day at a time, until ordinary becomes all we've ever known. One day every one of us will write the final page of our story. When that day comes, the question won't be how much money we earned or how comfortable we managed to become. The question will be whether we had the courage to become the person we were capable of being. Remember how this story began? The prison door was never locked. It never was. The key has always been in your hands. The only question left is this: will you spend another year staring at the door? Or will today be the day you finally walk through it?